service. But first, the countdown to the Rio 2016 Olympic Games is firmly on, and many an Olympic dream will be realised. Of course, though, for most taking part, they'll come up short, and their failure might leave them questioning what a life spent dedicated to training has really been for. The story of runner Suzy Favor Hamilton highlights this in a most extreme way.
Former Olympic athlete leading a remarkable double life, wife and mom at home, high-priced call girl in the hotels of Las Vegas.
Suzy went from competing in an Olympic final to turning to prostitution in Las Vegas. She starts her story in Sydney during the 2000 Olympics.
And taking up the lead is the blonde figure of Suzy Favor Hamilton. Dulecha in second place.
Suzy had already represented America in 2 previous games and was one of the favourites for gold when she reached the final of the 1500 metres as the second fastest qualifier.
On to the far side they go. Favor Hamilton, the fastest in the world this year with a time of 3 minutes 57. Very few of this.
Unfortunately, as the race developed, Suzy realised she wasn't going to win. Her dream was gone, and in fact what transpired was the start of her worst nightmare.
It's Mera Benida by 5 metres from Shakali of Romania coming through. Favor Hamilton has fallen to the track way back.
Looking back now through a lot of therapy, I had run the fastest time in the world, and I wasn't going to win. That was the moment I had decided to fall on purpose, because I felt that would be a great excuse instead of being the one whose mind was not working and couldn't handle the pressure. If I just fall, that's the excuse. But that was the moment that my life started to spiral down in looking back, because I had given my whole career, my whole life to train for this one day. I felt like everybody in the world was watching me that day. Nobody else had a life. They just were glued to the TV watching Suzy race. That's how out of perspective my mind was. And my sponsorship, Nike, had spent a lot of money on a commercial and invested in me to win the gold. And so I was just crushed. My life felt over. And I remember laying on the track with my face on the surface of the track. It's weird how I remember these details. And I remember telling myself that I was the biggest idiot. I had just ruined the chance for my life to change. And before that race, I wanted out of the sport. And I thought, if I win in Sydney, I can retire and I can go out as a success. But that didn't happen. And so I wasn't a success. I was a failure.
What Suzy didn't realise as she lay on the track in Sydney was that she was suffering with bipolar, a mental illness that can drive people to incredible highs and deep lows. Seeking a new way to fill the void left by athletics, she turned to a much more dangerous and frightening method.
I wanted to be adventurous. I wanted to see new things on a different side, not on a running side, because when I was an escort, I was winning the gold medal every time I was with the client, meaning there was no pressure. It was excitement. It was fun. It was liberating. I had no inhibitions. The drug Zoloft that I was taking at that time, I do believe strongly that it had an effect on me becoming an escort because I had no inhibitions. And the hypersexuality that was brought on by this drug. When you're manic, and people that aren't manic and don't understand it, it is an incredible feeling. You don't want it to end. It's an enormous high, better than winning a gold medal. So I actually transformed my running into my escorting. I found out that you could be ranked in the US as an escort. And my whole running career, I had been ranked. So now I'm thinking, wow, if I could be number one in escorting, that's like winning the gold medal. I don't have to brag about it or tell anybody because this is my little secret. And inside, I feel fulfilled. But I really have a hard time believing I could have gone to the extent of becoming an escort without the bipolar. I really don't believe I could have.
Interesting point that you make, but I wonder whether you would have been as successful in your running career without the bipolar.
I don't believe I would have been at all, because now I'm on a drug that has leveled me. I have more of a leveled brain, meaning the chemicals are more even and stabilize me more. I'm no longer on the Zoloft. And there's such a change in me. I'm so much more calm. When I was in the hypersexuality mode and escorting, sex was constantly on my mind. It was a constant. And I felt like sex just numbed me from any pain or any things that were happening in my brain that weren't positive. The sex and the thought of that always kept me on that high. And I love that. And I could maintain that high if I was in Vegas doing what I was doing.
Born in the state of Wisconsin, Suzy had always been a naturally fast runner. Winning felt good. And more than that, it brought great happiness to her parents. Her desire to please them was intensified by the behaviour of her brother, who was suffering with his own mental health issues.
I never knew or possibly could conceive that I would be suffering the same illness that my brother did. I actually lost my brother when I was, it was 1999. It was the year before the 2000 Olympics. He died by suicide. The illness just took over the brain. I totally believe it wasn't his decision in a healthy mind. He would never have done that. But because the mind, it was just taken over with so much pain that it was better to leave the world than suffer from that pain anymore.
That trauma, coupled with Suzy's Olympic failure, started a course of events that changed her life forever. But how did she go from being a track star to selling her body in Las Vegas?
After Sydney, I trained another 4 years for another Olympics. I would have made the team, but I was injured and I retired. I had a baby, which was the most incredible joy in my life. It made everything seem so insignificant. And after my daughter, I quickly slipped into what we thought was depression. But I went back to the doctors because I had some suicidal thoughts during that time. And one of the episodes was me driving my car. And I wanted to just drive off the road and end this life that I was living. And I didn't act on it, thank God. But I came home that night and told my husband. He saw the concern in me. And he said, I'll call the doctor or you call the doctor immediately. And I got in to see the doctor after I gave the doctor a call, which I was so embarrassed because I was the perfect person. And in my community, everybody knew who I was. And now I'm calling a doctor, telling a doctor that I tried to kill myself. They had me come in and they diagnosed me with depression. And I was given a drug, an antidepressant. And this particular antidepressant, in some cases, with somebody who is bipolar, can bring on an incredible manic state and also a hypersexuality, which a lot of people aren't quite familiar with that term. But again, nobody knew I was bipolar. It wasn't the doctor's fault that I was prescribed this. 2 months later, my husband and I decided it was our 20th anniversary. Let's do something crazy on our bucket list. And we decided to jump out of an airplane. For some reason, I had no inhibitions and I felt so high. And then the next thing we had planned, my doing more so than my husband, was I said, let's do a threesome for our 20th anniversary. And that threesome, in my case, it brought on this incredible manic high. From that moment, it was going to be a 6-month sexual exploration to the point of me trying out becoming an escort. And when I say an exploration, it meant hiring a gigolo, just me and a male escort. And it just became something I explored where I would meet somebody at a bar and hook up, which looking back was very dangerous. All of this was very dangerous. But I also see that I had a very repressed life. All I did was train. I really didn't party. I didn't date. My husband was my only sexual partner my entire life. So I was like, let go. I was free to explore. I had my husband's permission in that at that time we weren't getting along. And he had suggested, and me too, that maybe an open marriage would be something that would help us in our marriage. And obviously I was all for it because I was getting this tremendous high from what I was doing. And it also was this taboo. And being the perfect girl or perfect woman, I liked that. I liked that underneath I wasn't perfect and I could live this secret double life.
When Suzy's story broke in December 2012, almost all of the coverage in the US focused on the escort business and not what was behind it.
She's the Olympic golden girl whose secret life as a Las Vegas escort shocked the nation.
Suzy Favor Hamilton was the golden girl.
She lost her sponsorship from Nike. A running award named after her was renamed. But sex sells, and that's what drove this story. And surprisingly, it's something Suzy is grateful for.
I could have easily have chosen alcohol. I could have chosen drugs, which were starting to come into the picture. But those could have been the route that I chose instead of sex. And I honestly believe if it was alcohol or drugs, my story would never have seen the light of day. Nobody would have picked up on it. But it was because of the taboo of the sex and the sex for money that really made the headlines.
And yet, for female athletes, sometimes or often, sexuality and performance are often something that's projected, at least by media, at least by sponsors.
Yes, absolutely. That was one of the reasons I was popular, because early on in my career, I had actually very big boobs, and my boobs seemed to capture so much attention. In college, I had a coach who had received a letter from a woman tell me that my breasts were too large and I need to wear 2 bras. And I had another coach who was on the men's team in college who actually filmed my breasts while I was running and had the male athletes look at them. And I found out about all of this. And I had a coach who told me I wasn't allowed to have sex the night before or the day of a competition because it would drain my testosterone. I had all these men in my life controlling me. And so when I became the escort, I had the voice, I had the control of these incredibly powerful men, very famous men too, that people wouldn't believe were doing what I was doing. There's such a double standard to women's sexuality and men's, meaning I was labeled the whore, I was the slut, yet the man is still considered the stud, and that double standard needs to change. And there's nothing wrong with a woman enjoying sex, and even more than a man. But yet, in our culture here, it's looked upon in a bad light.
And what part in that, Suzy, has sport to play? What role should sport be taking in separating sport and sex in that way, in the way that women are viewed?
You know, that's a really great question, because I don't see that this is going to change overnight in any way. You go to a track meet, and one of the reasons, people love to look at the outfits that the women are wearing because they're so skimpy. And I think sometimes, as women, we use that to our advantage, meaning we can get more attention. And I know in my case, they wanted my looks to get attention to help out the sport.
Now in 2016, Suzy, with the continued support of her family, is learning to deal successfully with bipolar. She lives with her husband and daughter in California, and with the help of the right medication, is looking to a positive future, helping to shine a light on the darkness of depression and mental illness.
I never asked for bipolar in my life. Obviously, nobody does. But I believe being bipolar changed my life in many positive ways. It definitely almost took my life and caused a lot of problems, and it can ruin many relationships. So I'm very fortunate, extremely fortunate, to have a husband who has understood the disease since I was diagnosed and focused on the illness and decided that the illness was something that he was going to focus on, not the behavior.
And 15 years on, Suzy, from your last Olympics, how has your relationship with running changed?
I still absolutely love to run. I don't run daily anymore just because of being a miler. I put so many miles on my body that were damaging, and so lots of injuries. I run very, very slow because I don't clearly want to feel the pain from running. I want it to be enjoyable. Running will stay with me my entire life, but I won't be able to run or train like I used to, and that's okay, because I've been given the chance to try new things. And yoga has become a big part of my life, and seeing that I have a love for so many other sports.
And for yourself too?
Absolutely. I feel so much more content and at peace with myself, because one of the greatest gifts from all of this is also finding that voice to speak up, but also just not having to be perfect anymore. I am so far from perfect. And I like that. I like that I can say I'm sloppy, I'm messy. I sometimes say the wrong thing that people might look, oh my gosh, did she just say that? I like that I no longer have to portray something that I'm not. That's so refreshing.
The amazing story of Suzy Favor.